Hey, before we get to today's great episode, wanted to let you know of a new exciting thing going on for the Lounge. For the first time since we started this podcast, the Lounge has entered into a partnership with a company that is aligned in how we think. Completely stop gambling. So Betttr is giving away 200 free subscriptions for life to the first 200 users from this podcast. Download Betttr, find the link in the show notes, or searching Betttr in your app store. So it's Betttr, BETTR, quit gambling. Search for that on the App Store or click into the link in the podcast show notes. So I'll see you on Betttr. And now to today's episode. Welcome into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. My name is Eric, and I'm a compulsive gambler in recovery. Date of my last bet was June 15th, 2021. Welcome everybody back into the lounge after the new year and the holidays. We took December off, so it's good to be back resetting in the new year. And we're kicking off the new year with a great interview today with my brother and friend in recovery, John. John, welcome in. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me, and grateful to be here and kind of ringing the new year with you and everyone on the podcast.
Absolutely. All right. So, John, as we always like to do on the show, we're going to ask you to kick us off with the icebreaker of your recovery song. Tell us what that is and a little bit about why you've chosen it.
Yeah, there's a song by Joan Osborne. I think the title is One of Us, or that's what the main key hook is, but it kind of goes along the lines of, and I'm not going to attempt to sing. That's not my profession, but she says, like, what if God was one of us?
Oh, yeah, I
You know,
remember it.
just a stranger on the bus trying to find their way home. And then she's like, what if God was one of us, just a slob like you and me?
Yeah.
And then it's just, for me, it's very cathartic. So much of my addiction was around judgment and not acceptance. And some of the people that I've met in the rooms of recovery and other platforms associated, I would never meet except for the sole common denominator that we were in the room at the same time. And it was very like, you can call it, divinity, serendipity, fate, whatever. But I met these people, and some of the most amazing people in my life are nothing like me, from different backgrounds, orientations, faiths, etc.
Yeah.
And it really reminds me to keep an open mind. You never know where the message is going to be. And I can see, for me personally, God and humanity in everything if I'm, willing to look for the similarities and not the differences.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully said. And it's actually a great way for me to kind of segue into why John is here. The great part about being in recovery in LA is we have a ton of meetings in the area. And John has a lot more time, as he'll tell us here in a minute, in terms of his abstinence from gambling.
Mhm.
But I didn't actually meet John and start really connecting with him till probably about 6 months ago. And what happened was he was speaking at one of our meetings for about 15 minutes. And when he was telling a little bit of his story and his journey, it blew my mind. And I thought to myself, if he could do this and provide this kind of experience, strength, and hope in 15 minutes, how great would this be to have an hour or more on the podcast with John? So that's kind of what spurred me to ask John to come on and do it. And we've been trying to get it together for a little while, but I know you had a lot going on. You're going to tell us about school and all that stuff throughout your journey, and I'm just glad we were able to connect it and start off the year right. So let's do it. Let's do it. All right. So John, let's if you could first start just giving us your date of your last bet, and then maybe go into a little bit about just the early days of John's life, your upbringing, your family, what that whole situation was
Yeah,
through childhood.
sure. My name is John, and I am a compulsive gambler. And my last bet was March 25th, 2017. And I guess even before we start that, just to parlay into the song and how people meet, like, Eric runs a great meeting on the, not the west side, but I'd say more in the mid LA area. I don't know. I'm not the best with logistics,
That's
but
probably good. Yeah.
yeah, in that area. And I really don't get out there that much. And Eric knows I'm in school and graduate school. And a big part of my recovery is giving it back, working with others in more of a therapeutical and clinical setting. And I never would have stumbled upon meeting Eric and his meeting other than the fact that I was really trying to find out a schedule that would coincide with being in grad school at night and trying to find days where I could attend meetings. So when I say, if what if God was one of us and maybe they're different, like, for identification, yes, I'm a compulsive gambler. I'm also a Caucasian, cisgendered man. And to meet Eric in a meeting that's a LGBTQ pride and recovery, not only is it different from me, it's beautiful, and I could go there as an ally. And again, look for the similarities and not the differences. And you can see so much recovery in that meeting and so much beauty and growth. So that's how I met Eric 6 months ago. And as far as my background as a compulsive gambler, one of the nuances that is a lot different is whether I meet an individual like Eric or anyone at any meeting, a lot of compulsive gamblers will come in gambling for X amount of years, sometimes a prolonged amount of time, with no exposure to 12 steps, therapy, any attempt to recover. My story is a little different. I got enmeshed in my gambling when I was really young, so about 18 and a half, 19. My first meeting was not at my own accord. It was at the behest of my father. And
Mm.
I came in with braces, and you won't be able to see me. This is a podcast. I have a little bit of facial hair, not a lot, some scruff, but there were men in that meeting with more hair on their chest than I had on my face. When they asked me to identify, here, this 19 and a half, scared little boy was like, I think I answered 11, maybe 12 out of the 20 questions. And in my mind, I thought these men and women in this room had probably tipped dealers more money than I had ever spent. So most of my gambling, I'd say about 95%, was done in and out of the rooms of Gamblers Anonymous. So to qualify, it took me 12 years to get to where I am now.
Mm.
And I am forever grateful in perpetuity that I had the ability to screw up, grow up, and most importantly, ultimately, through a series of events, because many times recovery is not linear, I got to show up and be willing and really latch onto it. And that is so important to my story that makes it a little bit different, but also a little bit, for me, so much of what I do. It's why I chose to go back to school and become a therapist. It's why a lot of the men and women I resonate with and I work with, whether it's mentoring, sponsoring, etc., it's a lot of recidivism, a lot of individuals who may or may not get it on the first time, or they might be really young, you know, and it might be difficult to hold space or allow someone to have that experience. And for me, the best thing I ever did was stop gambling. And the second best was go back to school and get an education and really take what I learned in my program and not just apply it to my gambling, because that's the tip of the iceberg, apply it to all facets of my life. And it's just something that the journey continues to get better and better. It's not always perfect. And there's definitely hiccups. I shared with Eric, I was really sick uh, recently last month. And also I had a pretty interesting circumstance in my family. Eric was asking me about my family members, and I identify more from the realms of a process addiction, which gambling is. But I have some brothers in my family who identify with substance abuse, and one of them had had a relapse recently. So
Mm.
I was grateful I was able to be there and support them unconditionally with love, and also, get something out of it in the process to remember that a lot of people, not just individuals struggling with substances, but also gamblers, many of them are still out there, not in the rooms. And it's up to us, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's just in the way we live our lives to, it's attraction, not promotion, but we can model that here and we can also model it in our everyday lives with our friends and family.
For sure. Beautifully said. So let's go back a little bit. So do you remember growing up when gambling was first introduced to you? Were you
Yeah,
in your teens, or can you
yeah.
remember and talk a little bit
I
about
grew
that?
up, yeah, I grew up in the Inland Empire. So Temecula specifically. Before that, as a young kid, it was like Bonsall, Fallbrook. But most of my adolescence was in Temecula, California. So pretty small town. At the time, the biggest companies were Guidant, like a heart palpitation and valve manufacturer, and Pachanga was nothing what it is now. It was a tent. It was a small
Mm,
Indian casino. Now
mm,
there's like full golf courses. It's
right.
multi-million,
Resort.
not billions as a resort. But I really didn't gamble there because I was underage. So I was able to go to a casino more up in the hills. I think it's not Paula, but it was called Palma. And it was small, but you could be 18 or over. So I played blackjack there less than a handful of times, but it never really was an addiction at the time. Ultimately, what happened was I grew up in a family where I wouldn't necessarily be, people might use it pejoratively, it's an older term, but an identified patient. I had brothers who, one specifically, that was really enmeshed in his addiction early on. So I was more the good kid, the quiet kid. I don't want to make a big deal. And I repressed a lot of emotions and did things on my own. I got a job when I was 14 selling candy bars because I just wanted something. I wanted to buy this paintball gun. And my dad's like, you can't do it unless you work. So I'd go out on the street and sell candy bars and finally did it. And then I was 15, I was a dishwasher and I've always worked. Obviously, gambling occupied a lot of my money as time went on, but I was lost coming out of high school where a lot of people were still forming their identities, maybe going to college. I tried junior college, but I just wasn't ready. I have a learning disability, so I do have ADHD, and I just really wasn't consumed with education. I didn't have that, so I dropped out. But I knew a guy who I just met through friends. He owned a pizza business, and he was a gambler.
Mm,
And he really invited me how to play Texas No Limit with his brothers at their house in Menifee, which isn't that far from like Temecula, Murrieta area. So
right.
it started there, like 20 bucks, maybe, 40. And then, illegitimately, like just kind of going under the radar, we'd go to Oceanside to Ocean's 11, like a sailor casino,
Hmm.
and we'd play and no one would card me. And what happened is I really know that for me, when I say gambling is a process addiction, um, it's really ingrained in how I filter life and the lens and my behaviors and my rituals. And what happened is I wasn't going to school. I didn't know what I wanted with a career. And at that time early on, I was like, well, maybe gambling can solve my problems. Maybe I can make money. I don't have to invest a lot of time and energy. I mean, ultimately, I wanted the minimal investment with the maximum amount of return. And now I stand, before you as a 40-year-old man. I was still in my late teens, early 20s. And at that time, gambling was sexy. It was like, oh, you could win a little bit of money. And I remember having an A in a class, in a history class, which ultimately I dropped out of, and staring at what the time in my life seemed like a lot of money. Now it wouldn't be, but it was significant at that time. And this isn't when like phones existed the way they were. It was like a little ninja or sidekick flip phone.
Hmm.
And I remember going on the Blackboard message system at the university, the junior college, and like messaging my professor, oh, I can't make it, da, 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 da. And he's like, all right. He's like, we'll schedule a makeup date. And I never followed through, and that's just kind of emblematic of me as a compulsive gambler. I had potential, but I never uncovered, discovered or recovered it till later on.
Now, was there gambling in your family at all, even mildly? Maybe your dad or any the brothers that you talked about.
Yeah, my youngest brother is not a gambler.
Okay.
My middle brother has a little bit of the ism, but it's not his primary thing. It's more drug use,
Okay.
opiates. But he does gamble. And then as far as my parents, they're not compulsive gamblers. I mean, it's funny. I think my father once shared he was on a cruise and he was like talking to me on the phone. And right then I knew I was different because he's like, "Oh, I cried in my room. I lost a couple $100 on this thing. Your mom was in bed, and I went. And I feel so stupid." And I'm sitting there like laughing, thinking, "Oh my God, is my dad like a baby about his gambling? That's nothing." And of
Right.
course, I said nothing to him.
Right.
And then I was like, "Oh my God, like the way normal people gamble, or quote unquote normies, or recreational gambling is way different." And that's when I realized like gambling isn't a moral issue. I know people to this day who can gamble
Right.
the way I can have a drink. You know, I could have a
Sure.
beverage the way maybe an alcoholic can't, but
Right.
also my dad could play once a year or go in a Super Bowl $20 square with my cousin. I can't do that. And I've just accepted that.
Yeah. Okay, so your gambling starts in your late teens. It's pretty innocent, mild amounts of money. Maybe you're thinking, I'm going to get good at this. This could solve some financial
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah.
So how does it start to escalate a little bit where you start to say, oh my, this is maybe not normal behavior.
Yeah. I mean, at first it was innocence because I was a young kid. And at that time, I think for me, when I was young, like you have this, for me, an invincibility and a social naivete. You haven't really, at that point in your life, went out and paid all your bills anyway. So I, like you said, it's kind of like James Bond, like, ooh, a martini at the table and I'll win money. And
Right.
I kept losing money, but I was living at home and my expenses were relatively not that much.
Mhm.
Ultimately, it became worse. I was getting depressed. I was putting on weight, like just things were happening. And I had moved out of my parents' house. They're like, we can't let you stay here. Like, you have this problem. Like, they were trying to help me any way they could. And this was just early on. And I went to live somewhere, like rent a room. And ultimately, by then, I was almost 22 and I was just sad, you know, emotionally. Like, I didn't have any serious relationships where other young adults my age were going to college, doing these things to
Mhm.
find their identity, traveling the world. I was gambling or I was just work. I always worked at restaurants, but I'd go out on benders with my tips and just lose it all and then spend my day off wondering what happened.
So you
So
were open about it because it sounds like you're saying your parents knew were developing a problem already and they were not going to stand for it. So you were pretty open about what you were
I
doing.
was open. And at that time, like unlike, you know, like a substance where you can shoot something in your vein and unfortunately, you know, somebody could die right away. Like it
Right.
was a little different. It was more slow and progressive. But what happened to answer your question is I pulled a geographic at 22. I had called my grandmother and I was just like, hey, you're in Orange County. I'm going to move out with you. Like, I'll just be there 3 to 6 months in your guest room. I'm going to find a junior college out there, pick up on my school, and I'll get a restaurant job. Well,
Mhm.
3 to 6 months of no rent and the ability to really, you know, thrive turned into 4 years. And I
Mm.
was just miserable. I'd lock myself in my room after losing money. I put holes in the guest room just out of anger at myself. And that was probably my most darkest time because I had went to Gamblers Anonymous in Anaheim, and I
Mm.
know a lot of people there.
Mhm.
And it was nothing like my experience in LA because I was very much a ping pong ball. And ultimately, I lost a job over, I think it was Easter. I did a no call, no show, and my boss was like, you know, you've been working here a couple of years, and I'll vouch for you for another job, but I got to let you go. You didn't show up on a holiday, and you know,
Mhm.
shit had hit the fan, and then I got another job like 2 weeks later, and then that job was in Dana Point, working at like the Hyatt. I think it was a stone's throw away, a 15-minute drive to Ocean's 11, and then there I am making a ton of money on a holiday weekend on the 4th of July, and I'm doing it. I didn't even go home. I just did a bender at Ocean's 11,
Mm.
and I was like, shit, I need to leave this job. Like I'm screwed. You know, I'm gonna
Right.
fall asleep on the freeway. And I happen to know a therapist who he identified his religious identification was Judaism. He was Jewish, and he's like, "Listen, I know you're not Jewish, but like you're out of control." I think I called him once, emotional, in a breakdown, and probably said some things I shouldn't have, and it alerted him. And
Mm.
he's like, "Listen, you need to check into this. I'm calling your dad. I'm worried." my dad comes down to see me at my grandma, checks on me, takes me out to dinner. He's like, all right. A week later, I call him and I say, Dad, I need a ride. He's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know if I told you, I voluntarily checked myself into this place, a Jewish rehab called Betttr off Venice
Mm.
Boulevard in Culver City. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it's just too much for me. I can't do it on my own. So I left my car in my grandmother's driveway. In the first, I don't know, 6 months, I did that and I was there and it really helped me a lot. Um, Ultimately, my story goes on, but that place, here I am, this young kid who's, a cradle Catholic. I was raised Catholic, went to Catholic school, and ultimately, like the running joke, but in all seriousness, I was saved by Jews through Judaism. And at that time of my life when I needed it most, I spent about a year there.
Okay, so the 4 years you were with your grandmother in Orange County, that's the crux of time where it really got out of control and you're at the casino all the time. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
okay, got it.
it was terrible. She'd wait at night, like praying a rosary, like, and on one hand, she was like my best friend. Like I have her tattooed on my arm, and we traveled the world together when she was older. It's kind of like being raised by two moms.
Hmm.
But on the other hand, I think she loved me so much, and she felt like because my addiction, like my gambling was nuanced, and even I was open, it was very closeted. Like I was a good kid. I
Hmm.
was getting in the way, and she would just be like, very supportive of me. But ultimately, I mean, it's an emotional thing. It's a disease, and it was my bouts of depression around it when I go on benders and just the way I felt. And I think everybody's life around me was getting bigger. And by that time, I think I was 26
Hmm.
and I was just beside myself.
Got it. Could you identify, we always talk about these two types of compulsive gamblers, the action gambler versus the escape gambler, as the addiction is unfolding. Did you identify strongly with one or the other, or was it kind of all meshed together for you?
It was a little meshed, but also I think because I never wanted, I was always someone like my dad would have a talk with me like many times when I was out there going in and out, and he'd be like, I think it's like you're afraid of success. Like you start doing something and then you just burn it all to the ground, like extreme highs and extreme lows.
Hmm.
So gambling, or in my opinion, addiction, it stunts my maturity. It allows my brain to not fully develop and experience things. And it's so strong. Like even though gambling isn't necessarily a drug in the sense, not like a powder or a chemical, like it does alter me like chemically, like it changes my balance. And they've even
Sure.
done like studies, like I don't know if on humans in general or how it was. Don't quote me on this, but basically it was that when certain gamblers, and they've done the study with this, so I'm not saying every gambler, but the ones that participated, they were monitoring the what was going on in their brains with the dopamine levels and the interactions, and it was the same equivalent of like someone doing a line of cocaine. Like their brain just started to just flood
Hmm.
with all this, neuroactivity and dopamine surge. And I identify with that because um, when I used to like try to take a month, maybe 2 months off, and I'd go back, I literally knew I was a poker player for identification purposes, Texas No Limit, for
Hmm.
all those who are listening. And I would know my first buy in was just going to go because I was shaking. Like my legs couldn't stop shaking. So by
Wow.
the time I ordered a green tea, which is totally counterintuitive, more caffeine, but I knew that that first 100 or whatever I was buying in with, it was just a taste. I had to let my body
Mm.
feel this rush.
Got it. Now, were you the kind of poker player who was isolated at the table, or were you one of the, hey, I'm like the life of the party guy who wants to just
I
be
don't think the
shooting the
life of the
shit?
party. Like
Yeah.
I'd talk to people, but I wasn't like gonna be like I don't really have any friends I met through the casino besides my one friend from years ago, but we met in person. And like I wasn't out like drinking with them or having big parties. I was just there, and it was kind of
Mhm.
like a junkie with a needle and a spoon. Like when I sat down, I just got my fix, and as time went on, nights turned into days. I pulled many a gambling bender.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Um, and it was so you stuck with poker. Now, did you ever venture into the online? gambling? Because at
No,
that
like
point, right? Or
it was really catching on with like,
yeah,
the whole Full Tilt and
right,
Chris
right.
Moneymaker and all those guys who were invested. And
Yep.
obviously that's hit a ceiling, but that was never my thing. And like in many ways, I'm very similar to who I was now. Like I'm an emotional person. Obviously now I'm much more um, healthy and secure and comfortable in my life and who I am. But I believe that always existed. But I had a double life. I never fed. It's like having two different parts of you, and one is just repressed and never fed. And
Hmm.
I just compensated for what I was starving for, which what I really want. Like I love being in school, I love helping others, and I am a people person. Like I wouldn't say I'm a complete extrovert, but I like talking to people, I like listening. But I did none of that. All I did was work a lot at restaurants, not take care of my self-care, and ultimately think that gambling was going to solve my problem. So it was much way like the same body someone takes a prescription or a medicine. It was like this false sense of trying to get right. And I think what happens is, you asked me about when did I cross the bridge. It's like at first it was really fun. It was kind of innocent. And even when my dad took me in, like, okay, like he'll snap out of it. This is a phase. But as
Hmm.
I started to get older and have more regrets and resentments around what I was going. And ultimately, I knew when I really knew I'd crossed the line, it was like I knew I had a problem. And I knew even as I started to go more gamble, it was like the chances of me winning or this changing are it's almost irrelevant. I just needed to do it. It was my process. It was the way I got right when I couldn't deal with my emotions, my feelings. I didn't know how to express or emote through anything.
Yeah. So, as you have learned more now with many years of recovery and now being in that, heading down that field of your life in terms of a career in therapy, as you able to look back now with a lot more clarity about the history of all this for you, have you been able to connect any dots of where this turned into an addiction for you, and potentially was there something earlier in your childhood, be it traumatically, emotionally, something that connected those dots? And I ask that because I've been open, I think, not just on this podcast, but in our
Mhm.
meetings about, I discovered through recovery over the last few years that I had a total correlation of my gambling addiction from my decade or so growing up being in the closet as a gay guy, right? And
Right.
I never learned emotionally how to process my feelings. I never had an outlet for it, and I hid, and I became a liar, and all those things replicated themselves ultimately in addiction. So I just wonder, for your life, was there any kind of that connectivity for you, or was gambling just an isolated thing that happened to you for its own reasons?
I don't think it was isolated. I mean, I have the ism. You asked me if addiction runs in my family, and I mean, my brothers have it.
Yeah.
My parents don't. If I looked at like a family genogram, there is addiction on both sides of the family tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
I
have
had
it
a
too.
great aunt that was like, ran like made bathtub gin and ran like, you know, booze during Prohibition to make money, and then did
Mm,
books. Hello, I have another family member who's a bookie, etc. Like
got it.
it's so it's in my long term, like the lines of the genogram. You can see it, and you can see the patterns, the disconnects, the triangles. But for me, similar. Even though, like again, like yeah, there's differences between us in our orientation and that, but even someone who's I identify as cisgendered, you are with LGBTQ as like a proud gay man. When you said to me not being able to deal with emotions, like my ears perked up.
Mm,
And what that made me think about was growing up in a household where I saw addiction early on with my brothers, and I
mm,
was the oldest. So I learned really quick, like, hey, like my feelings, my emotions are invalid. Why would I want to create more dysfunction when maybe I'm the most healthiest one here and I'm just seeing it all? And I saw how it affected my parents. So I was very closeted in the sense that, I had this double life. Like on one hand, I was a really good kid and I
mm,
didn't experiment with drugs like that or didn't get into that.
mm,
But gambling was my way to cope with my emotions and feelings because I didn't feel comfortable, one, dealing with that in my household. And then as I just got older, it wasn't necessarily my family anymore. It was, I had the ism. I knew I have the ism. So it
Hmm.
manifests in different forms. Like before I was ever a compulsive gambler, I remember at like 17 years old going into 18, I wanted to work out. I wanted to work out so bad. I remember getting picked on as a kid and going from like freshman year being teased and called names to sophomore year working out incredibly and getting to play like varsity football, be a homecoming prince. Like my whole life changed. Fast forward to like 17, I'm like, shaving my body, going to tanning salons. I go to Cancun, have a crazy trip. And then I
Hmm.
get back and I'm like, I got a fake ID. I'm seeing some women at the time, whatever. And I'm just like, I'm not fulfilled. And it was
Right.
like right around then I kind of switched and went right into gambling. But I'd say my first like addictive thing was probably at that time in my life, like more body image exercise. So I knew I
Yes.
had the ism.
Got it.
And obviously I liked gambling. I liked the idea that, hey, I don't have to take anyone with me. I'm not going to hurt anyone. This is just me, which is totally false. Addiction hurts so many of us,
Of course.
ones we love around us, and it's got a ripple effect. But at that time, like that's kind of how it manifested for me.
Got it. Yeah, I think what you shared about your brothers being younger and getting into substance abuse early and how that sort of shaped your narrative of being the older brother and maybe
Yeah.
not wanting to cause that disruption. When they, I'm going to ask you to touch on this for a minute if you don't mind. I'm just curious when they were getting into that behavior early. Did you see that coming? Were you guys close as brothers? Or was that like, holy crap, where
We
did that
weren't
come
super
from? I had no
close. I mean,
idea.
yeah, there was like love in the family. It was like a typical like suburban, like, upper middle class family. We had a
Uh,
nice track home. My parents remodeled it. Like it was nice. Like we never went without anything. When you look at the world we live in, it's like I have straight privilege, I have white privilege, there's a lot of things that were afforded to me. Like you said, like, being a member of the LGBT community or me being an ally, like one of the differences is I don't have to justify my sexuality to anyone. And that's unfortunate that you have to, or I don't have to walk down the street and have someone judge me for my race. So I feel that looking at my upbringing, there was nothing necessarily wrong,
mhm.
but it was the very like, you know, white, you know, everyday community, decent people. But behind closed doors, my family had dysfunction and we made it a point to kind of be secretive of it. It wasn't like the whole neighborhood was going to know or we were going to talk about it out in the open. And that's kind of where I learned like my gambling even more so became secretive because my brothers, when I was growing up, like I left the house at 18, but all those teen years, like they weren't in recovery. Like it
Right.
was emotional turmoil, obviously getting in trouble, getting kicked out of schools. Like I watched that happen.
Yeah.
And then as I got older, I just had kind of realized like, hey, like at that time, I was just like, I'm not that bad. Like this is just something like this is my own personal thing,
Right.
you know. And obviously, um, the issue with addiction is it's all a not yet. My life just got worse and worse, and I crossed invisible lines
Mhm.
that I never thought I would cross.
Do you think you stayed away specifically from substance use because of your brothers? And that was always like, that's going to be off limits to me. And maybe that's where you started to creep a little bit into gambling and that didn't feel the same.
I think so. Like I used it to justify it. Like, hey, like I'm only doing this to myself. It's more controllable. It's like the environment is only for you know what I mean. But yeah, but later on in my story, I'll share with you like a big part of me coming back and having the time I did now. I did have an accident, and
Right.
I don't identify as someone who struggles with substances, but we'll get to it. But just to
Yeah.
kind of give you like a footnote, like again, having that ism, like a lot of people will say it was like whack-a-mole. I went through a stage where again, trying to be comfortable in my own emotional identity and self-esteem. And I went on like a workout bender and I was working out a lot. I was in great shape. And leave it to me, I think I did like 3 workouts in one day or something. Like I did like a spin class, a hot yoga, and something else. And I go to the doctor and my right side is like my intercostal muscles are torn. And he's like, yeah, like what's going on with you? Like you're one of those type A dudes, like alpha dudes, like you gotta relax. And he's like, here's a light Xanax prescription, just take it as needed.
Mm.
And I never took it. I'd have like a glove compartment just full of them, and I wouldn't use them. But then life goes on, and at this point, like I almost had white knuckled not gambling in my early, like late 20s, early 30s, like almost a year. But I
Mm.
wasn't going to meetings. I'd been in and out of the program. At this
Right.
point, I had met a woman that I loved her, but it wasn't going to work out. I thought maybe I did it for her, like maybe she was my Eskimo. And at this time, like my credit's good. I don't have gambling debts. And it was at a time in the economy where you could go to like Wells Fargo and do an unsecured signature loan. So like within a matter of minutes and some underwriting the next day, you could
Hmm.
have a significant amount of money. So I did that. And then I wasn't playing like smaller stakes. I was playing bigger. And I thought, oh, Eric, like I'll be the Mark McGuire, the Barry Bonds of Texas No Limit. And
Right.
I would just take one or two. It was like the smallest prescription, like point micro whatever of oxycarbazepine or whatever the pharmaceutical name is for Xanax.
Yep.
And don't quote me. I don't know the exact name, but I remember the bottle. And I just take a few and it'll kind of mellow me out. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like no one's gonna know my tells. I'm doing it, in moderation. And I only did it then. And I was good about it. But then what happened is I started playing more and I
Mm.
started having the potential to lose more. And then without even knowing it, one day I called off work. Like it was a slow night at the restaurant I was at. And I remember going to like an AM PM and getting a Diet Coke, a cherry Diet Coke or something, and paying the $3 withdrawal fee to take money out of an ATM that was like at the gas station. I took out a few
Hmm.
hundred. I
Hmm.
took a few of those small little pills with my Diet Coke. I get there, I start playing. I must have taken a few more. And all of a sudden, I just remember feeling slow, like the pit boss walking up to me and being like, hey, are you drinking or anything? I'm like, no, I'm not even drinking. Like I wasn't. And then I was playing more and I just started to nod out without even knowing it.
Mm.
And somebody was like, hey, seat eight, like you got to check better fold. And I was like, I was just losing my like, ability to figure out what was going on.
Wow.
So I excused myself. I went to the restroom and I went and I looked at the bottle and I was like, oh no, I took them all. So
Wow.
I don't know how many it was, but you know, it
Yeah.
was more than enough for if 0.25 is like a fourth of one bar or whatever, like I'm sure it was a couple bars, which is a lot for somebody who like me who isn't necessarily addicted consciously. Like this was a thing that erupted out of my gambling.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
happened was I was in a full blackout. And apparently I got there on a Thursday. And unbeknownst to me, I woke up in my bedroom on a Saturday. I was like Guy Pearce in the film Memento, where he has to like figure out his whole life and his memories. Like
Wow.
I didn't know what was going on. I don't know if you've seen that Christopher Nolan film. So apologize if no one knows the reference. But my point being that I literally woke up on Saturday. There was a car, my car, on the side of the street that was all messed up like a can opener. And I must have got it towed. I don't know what happened. And I'm calling the bank and I'm saying, hey, Wells Fargo, like I was at a casino and I was robbed. Like you need to
Mm.
put the money back in. And, they did for like a week. And then pending the investigation, they call me and they go, Mr. Da 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 da. So we have you on video. We reviewed the tapes. We have you going back and forth to the ATM, not five, not six, like eight times. So we're going to take that money. It's ours.
Wow.
So it was a perfect example of being just out of control,
Yeah.
but also scared where I don't know what my memory was because I got there on a Thursday. Apparently, I must have stayed overnight in a full blackout, and Friday night somehow convinced the valet to give me my keys. And
Mm.
if you know anything about Hollywood Park, it's like right there in Inglewood.
Yep.
Must have blacked out immediately when I was driving again. And I crashed my car into the embankment of Century and Aviation. And what woke me up was an airbag in my face. And I pull over, I get out of the car, I dial 911, and the operator's like, don't worry, we've already had people calling. And I'm like, the cops get there. And at this point, I've went from like, flight or fight, like I'm having this crazy flood of like adrenaline now. And I'm like, yeah, I tried to avoid a pothole in the road. Like, are you okay? And I'm just doing everything to be normal because I know if I get in an ambulance, like I'm screwed. I'm under the
Yeah.
influence of drugs or the
Right.
pills. So they're like, we're gonna have an ambulance coming. I'm like, it's okay, I'm okay. I just think I have like a minor like little knock to the head, like, and they're like, well, you need to sign a waiver. And I'm like, fine. I decline the ambulance, and then I tell the cop, I'm like, I have AAA. Can you call it for me? And they're like, yeah, we'll do that. So again, this is like one of those miracles because I could have easily gotten arrested. I'm in the AAA guy's car, and he's taking my car that the front end is totaled, driving me back home to Culver City, and now he's tapping me on the shoulder, saying, "Hey, wake up!" So I must have nodded out again. He's like, "Wake up! You're home." I get to my house. I go up to my room. I close my door, and I must have passed out. And then I wake up the next day, and I got like messages from my work, like, "Where were you? What's going on?" And I'm just trying to figure it all out. And that's when I really, really knew, okay, like this is full blown, like out of control to the 10th degree. And I did gamble one more time. So I had had a,
Now, that
yeah,
incident of the car wreck with the blackout, you were how long after the year in Beit Shuva did this occur subsequent?
yeah. So like I had left Beit Teshuva, and sorry if the story's going back and
No,
forth,
no,
but
it's okay. We'll piece
yeah.
it all together.
I had went there, I think it was like, I don't know if it was like June 2011, and I stayed there like 13 months. I did like 4 months and like inpatient, and then I did like sober living. And I
Hmm.
had had three relapses, but they allowed me to stay because it was kind of like, hey, I just want to be honest with you guys. I didn't take anyone from the house with me. I spent $50 or $80. And they're like, yeah, like you seem to hit this emotional wall and you don't know how to deal with it. And then you go out and you come right back. And that happened three times. And it was never intense like what I was telling you about. It was like small ones. And then they finally just sat me down. They're like, listen, you're more than welcome to come visit here and be a part of this community. We just think you're not done yet wrestling with this,
Hmm.
you know? And there's like kind of this thing, like I remember, even on Catholic, I'd listen to all these, these Jewish, I don't know if you call them sermons or what it is, but I participated and I learned a lot and I absorbed a lot. And some of it was like talking about in Judaism, like they wrestle with God. They try to, find out between man's will and God's will. I just remember sitting this with this rabbi, and he was just saying, like, hey, like, you're not done wrestling, you know, but you're always welcome here. And ultimately, what happened was when I did finally stop, I ended up going back and running a meeting there and helping other people there, and like becoming a secretary in a meeting there and
That's awesome.
participating in some of the Shabbats and stuff. It was really cool.
Yeah.
But to kind of go back to that relapse, so I lose everything. And the crazy irony is, two of the guys at the meetings of GA, one of them's still in and the other one isn't, but they were literally funding my Ubers and like getting me to the meetings in the beginning because I had no car.
Hmm.
And just to show you the grips of gamma that could happen to any of us, that one of those members now isn't even around anymore. They're in and out constantly. So
Hmm.
somebody who saved my life is now went full circle and went the other route, right?
Wow. Right.
So that
Wow.
was impactful. But ultimately, what happened was I started coming back. A month or two had gone by. My accountant at the time was connected into the recovery circles and in program and stuff. And they just happened to know somebody. And they're like, listen, like, you make enough money to afford a car, but your credit's screwed. And it was kind of like a Matthew McConaughey, like Lincoln Lawyer situation. Like, my accountant called someone he knew. I remember going up Mulholland and writing like a written contract, and they had a car they needed to get rid of. And the person's like, well, if you know my accountant and this person knew him too, they're like, you're good, you're vouched for. And I ended up, getting that car, and I paid it off, and I own, by being in recovery, I've owned nicer vehicles since then. But the interesting part was when I had that vehicle in the beginning, here I am in somebody else's car, like having this under the table lease to pay the payments off. And I went one more time to Hollywood Park. And that's why my date is March 25th, because I didn't go play thousands. I didn't play hundreds. I played like a
Mm.
$40 no limit. And I get there in this car and the valet's closed. It's like got cop tape around it. And I couldn't figure out. I thought maybe it was an accident. So I park farther away, like couple stories up in the structure, and I walk down, I start playing, and I'm just like, I know I shouldn't be there, but I just can't help myself. I'm
Mm.
in my addiction. And what hit me was I think I had like $30 left in chips. I maybe bought in for 40, lost, banked a little bit more, whatever. And I asked somebody, I said, hey, like, what's up with the valet? Like, I wanted to valet. Like, oh, you didn't hear? And I'm like, no, what? And they're like, somebody put a gun to their head and died by suicide.
Mm,
They, and I was just like, whoa. And I, even saying it now, like the hairs on, not good enough video, but they perk up. I get really
mm,
prickly about it. And I just remember looking to the seat 6 because I was seat 7. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's yours. And he's like, what? Are you sure? I'm like, play it. I mean, it was $30. And I had to get out of there. I was just thinking, like, what am I going to do? Because some other guys, like, I had paused on my turn to deal with the hand, and someone's like, seat 7, check better fold. Like, we got an effing game to play. And I
mm.
was so blown away by that. Like, these people were more concerned with the game than the humanity of somebody, um, taking their own life.
And that
So
was
I
that.
left
Okay.
and
And
I
that
went
was
into my bathtub and I just cried my eyes out. And I was like, how am I ever going to get back to GA? How
wow.
am I going to forgive myself?
Wow.
And I ended up, I think in the first 4, maybe 6 months, I went to maybe 2 GA. I didn't go to a lot of GA meetings. I had a lot of shame. I remember seeing a therapist. And at the time, uh, it was like discount therapy at a place where you could go see it on a sliding scale. So I was like, hey, if I can get in here 2, 3 times a week, and I saw this therapist and I would tell her, hey, she's like, why don't you go to a meeting? It sounds like, it would be a good thing for him. Like, it is, but if I go in there, I'm going to lose it, or I'm going to lose it on someone else. I just had so much raw
Mm,
shame about it built up.
wow.
So I kept going to her and just going and going and just learning how to feel comfortable, because I just never felt comfortable in my own skin talking
Mm,
about my emotions. And then something snapped. I went to Beit Teshuva. I started showing my face. I took the commitment as the secretary at that meeting. I
mm,
went back to the meeting I had stole money from. I stole the I was the secretary at the Monday Night Roxbury meeting, and leave it to me. The next week was a bye week. It was Martin Luther King on Monday, Martin Luther King Day.
mm.
So it's like 100 and something bucks in there. I
Yeah.
go play. And then smart me thinks, oh, I got this figured out, Eric. Like, my direct deposit's going to hit because I don't have to run the meeting next week. We have the week off. So then I put it back. And then, of course, I wait till like the end of the meeting. I go, guys, I got something to say. Like, so I took the money, but it's back. So it's no big deal. I got this all figured out. And then somebody goes, John, thanks for your honesty. Do you mind stepping outside? I already knew they were gonna
Right.
vote somebody in because it's like,
Right.
obviously.
Yes.
And
You broke the covenants of GA for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the way it works is it all goes for so I ended up running that meeting again. They accepted me. I ended up um doing I couldn't do it for very long. I had a commitment that was interfering, but I ended up doing like intergroup, like a treasury thing. Like,
Hmm.
I could really have the chance to get involved, and my whole life changed. And I owe it in perpetuity. I don't work with that therapist anymore. I've since, done other therapy stuff, but that therapist, I told myself when I chose to go back to school, I was like, if I could give one person that gift and
Mm,
allow them to feel comfortable enough so they could take what they're experiencing in that room and apply it to their life outside, I die a happy man. And then I
mm,
remember when the pandemic hit, I was like about 3 years into recovery. And I had hit a point in my life where I'm like, not gambling is it's not enough. I hadn't done enough work on myself. I was somewhat fumbling through my step work, but ultimately I feel that, and I think I've shared this quote with you, like, first we stop gambling and then we do the impossible. We get to live a life.
yeah.
And my education where it's at now wasn't where it was at 4 years ago. So basically, now I have like 3 degrees in county, and I've had a bunch of success with that. But I started with one class, and I met a therapist who happened to also be in the rooms of recovery, and I just asked them like their story, and there was a lot of similarities. And this individual was like, if I can do it, you can do it. Like, you didn't get sober to live an ordinary life. You want to live an extraordinary life. So
Wow.
I did it very pragmatically. I took one class
Mhm.
and saw how it felt. And then I took two, and then before I know it, like, flash forward now 4 years, like, I've been going to school full time. I've done internships, done research studies. I've gotten paid to sit on panels and work in, you know, intensive inpatient, outpatient, So I've done like process groups. Like I've really got to do some cool stuff. I did a volunteership at a suicide prevention center with Dee Dee Hirsch. That was beautiful. So again, like everything that's taken place is because of GA
Mhm.
and my whole recovery journey.
Yeah. And I want to talk more about that. But I want to go back to that moment you described, which I think sounds like your last, as you're sitting at the table and you hear about this suicide that took place,
Yeah.
and you walked out and gave somebody your remaining money, and that
Oh
was
yeah,
the
I
last
just donked it right off. I was like,
that was
yoink.
actually the last time
Yeah.
you had made a bet. And I mean it's a very unique story, right? Because I think when we hear most people talk about the end of their gambling, they're coming in off of like this unbelievable financial disastrous
Mhm.
moment, and yours is almost the opposite of that, where you literally gave away your remaining money upon hearing about this tragic situation, and that was like
Oh,
this
yeah,
moment of clarity for you saying,
yeah.
what
And
the fuck am I doing here? Right?
exactly. And
Wow.
a lot of people will sit, they'll use that terminology in the room, like that phrase, like a moment of clarity. But
Yeah.
it's true, like, you know, it was like that moment. And it just, unlike I said, like I've seen individuals come in who have had success in business or academia, and they might be making more money at a certain point in their life, and there's heavy destruction. And I felt the common denominator I share with you or anyone is I lost so much more than money. I don't know if you've ever seen the commencement speech by Steve Jobs at, I forgot if he's doing it at Stanford or where, you can watch on YouTube. It's got millions. But
Mhm.
here he is, and he's sharing with these students that he dropped out of college and he went to study cryptography on computer and make Apple or Mac or whatever. Like he was successful, but by this time he's beat cancer once or twice. And after that thing, I think he lived another year and died. But he's sharing with him, he's like, be courageous, take risks. He's like, be authentic. He's like, I have all the money in the world. And he's like, I'm telling you, as graduates, I can't buy time. I can't get it back.
Mhm. Right.
And that really stuck with me because, here I am now. And like going to school has been amazing, but it's been a huge sacrifice financially to put, I don't work a lot. And obviously the payoff is going to be exponential in the long run. But I'm fully aware that I did not go to school in my late teens, early 20s. In fact, I dropped out like 7 times. And I didn't do all these things, and I can't buy the time back. I can work and get money back, and I've restored a lot of relationships with my family. But anytime I talk to people, especially like I end up, for some reason, the universe brings me these young men who struggle with recidivism going in and out. And I always
Mhm.
tell them, like, I'm not here to judge you. I was you. It took me 12 years to get a year,
Mhm.
and now almost 8 years later,
Yeah.
here I am. But yeah, like I didn't have that financial destruction. I mean, I definitely didn't make a lot of money
Mhm.
and I was always blowing it. So it was definitely unenjoyable.
Yeah.
But I really lost my ability to tap into any potential or identity of who I am. I felt like addiction stunted my growth.
Right.
And not just academically, but spiritually, emotionally, financially, relationships, like
Yeah.
a lot of things I just didn't do in life and became a late bloomer because of my addiction. That was my number one love affair.
Yeah.
Like I'm not dating anyone, but I'm in love with the casino.
Yeah.
I'm not feeling better about myself, but my self-loathing and emotional disconnect is predicated on this unhealthy relationship with the casino, right?
Yeah.
And it just got worse and worse and worse.
Wow. Yeah. Just that reality that it took somebody's suicide, uh, that was actually the final straw for you that
Well,
saved your life.
and yeah, and not
It's
to
amazing.
not minimize that because that is so poignant and impactful and it's someone's life. I do not know that stranger. I
Right.
wish I did. Like I went back to the site I crashed my car. I've been there just to reflect and like remember
Hmm.
where that was, and it's changed. They've erected SoFi and all that stuff with the Ram
Yep.
Stadium, etc. But what I want to say is you don't hear as much about it in GA. And even though I don't go to other fellowships, I do study like the 12 steps. Like our literature was founded on AA. So I look at that book like a textbook.
Hmm.
I've sat in on other meetings out of interest. And what I kind of found that was less in gambling, which, like I said, is more identified as a process addiction, but in more substance abuse and alcohol, like you will hear it a lot, the phrase, some have to die so some can live.
Mm.
And unfortunately, suicide, overdose, losing the lives, we might not hear it about it as much in GA, but years down the line, I found out it's something that casinos like they keep it away from the news, but multiple times a year in Las Vegas and other casinos, there are suicides. There might not be reported in the news, but they're there.
Right.
And there are also people who are um, dually addicted or cross addicted. And we knew someone who came into a meeting years ago, this kid, and, beautiful looking kid, great family. And he, was a gambler and he also did drugs and died of an
Mm.
opiate overdose. So, I mean, it's one of the sad precautionary tales that some of us don't get to live that message. However, in that most tragic, dark moment, it can be cathartic enough for someone like me
Yeah.
to tap into it and be like, hey, I'm no better or no worse. This could be me.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt like I never got to that point, but I also am so grateful and willing and honest to know if I chose to keep going down the road, that's not a no, that's just a not yet.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, we're going to break there, and then we're going to come back on the other side, and we're going to talk to John about all of his amazing recovery. So we'll be back in the Gambling Recovery. Welcome back into the Gambling Recovery Lounge. All right, so where we left off, we are going to now talk to John about all of the great years now of recovery. So, John, you had started to talk about coming back into GA and multiple years now, obviously coming up on 8 years. Um, so GA for a lot of people doesn't resonate well. I think we know being in the rooms, right? It is a fraction of the people out there in the world who have
Yeah.
developed gambling disorder. For you, was GA? Um, I know you talked when you were a kid first coming in, you didn't relate at all because of how young you were. Coming back though, this second round, did you take to it differently? Was your perspectives different, or was it still a struggle when you came back to really say this is going to be the path of recovery for me?
Yeah. I mean, definitely like recovery isn't linear. And I've had times where, even on this journey now, like I'll turn 8 years old on God willing, the 25th of March. But where in the very beginning, I went to a therapist because I was so ashamed and just riddled with guilt. But then again, that light turned on again, just like I had that moment of clarity
Mhm.
at the casino with that individual dying by suicide. I had that moment of clarity almost half a year in, and then I just jumped into GA like a lightning bolt. And for some reason, I think the biggest thing for me was I had to feel comfortable being uncomfortable and talking about things, feeling like nobody's going to judge me and no one is going to, you know, I don't know, I felt so insecure. And I've talked to a lot of individuals in recovery, and this is like a thing where over time it just gets better and better. And now, like, I always tell people like my 20s were all over the place. My 30s were much better because I got into recovery at 32 and a half.
Yeah.
And now my 40s, I'm like a fine wine. I'm really comfortable in my own skin. Like I have had so many things happen to me, and maybe I'll share a few, but I just let them roll off. Like, and even to like loosely paraphrase, don't quote me on it, but there's like a quote or a line in the big book that talks about like, we don't take ourselves too seriously. We wear our recovery like a loose garment.
Mhm.
And or like in my definition, I say, be like Bruce Lee, breathe like water, just be in a flow state. And that's taken a while. Like I've had some moments, and that's where like I feel like it's similar to my education. Like I've went from dropping out 7 times to being a straight A student, but so many times I feel like I'm failing forward, even though I've gotten great grades. And the way that correlates from academia into the rooms of recovery is you'll hear a different phrase. It might not be failing forward. It might be, Eric, fake it till you make it,
Hmm.
or act as if. The promise is, they say, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, work, 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 work. Recovery isn't linear. And I always tell people that I interact with, and people told me, hey, John, after that first year, it's a little bit different. You're not getting a keychain, or if you're in a different fellowship, a chip or whatever
Yeah.
you use to quantify your time. You're not getting all this encouragement.
Right.
And as life got more real and real, I realized the real metaphorical dice roll is to go and live a life, like to really allow for the space and the emotion and the fear of the unknown to go live a life. Because yes, I had a gambling problem, but deep down at my core, I had a living problem. And the back of page 17 is instructions on yes, not gambling, but ultimately a blueprint on how to live life.
Yeah.
I don't know how to live life on my own. And
Right.
I have a disease that's emotional, or as described in the big book, like from our mother program, AA, like, which I love to use it because it's like a textbook. It's a, you know, obsession of the mind
Mhm.
and an allergy of the body. So that means to me, and I was telling somebody, like, that I had gotten really sick recently. I had a family member, go down a dark path. Like a lot had gone on. I had a busy semester. I love someone that I love dearly, and unfortunately, we just weren't compatible. So there was a breakup. I had all these things go on.
Mhm.
And looking back in hindsight, to be very transparent and honest with you, where I am now, I don't realistically think year 1 or 2 or whatever I would have dealt with that the way I am. But you know you go back into this investment, like learning how to live this life and have life skills and tools in recovery, and how to work through versus around a problem. So I always tell people, I may not always have the time and logistics to get to as many meetings I used to take the commitments, but I tell you with certainty that, yeah, I was sick for 2 weeks. Like I couldn't go to meetings.
Hmm.
And I had my brother, I remember talking to him like, hey, I can't do this
Yeah.
thing. My brother's literally relapsed.
Right.
The next day, I went to a meeting. And then the next day, I called a newcomer and we went to a meeting together. Like I knew instinctually, it's like brakes on a car. Like I do not want to go too off course. And my brake system, my recovery system knows that. And it's just boom. Because when I say an obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body, what that means is I am never surprised nor judgmental when somebody goes out. Because in my natural state as a compulsive gambler and someone who has the ism, that's my comfort zone. That's where I go when I'm not dealing with life in recovery. Everyone talks about a higher power, whether you're affiliated with God or you're
Hmm.
just more spiritual, atheist, agnostic,
Hmm.
whatever. Well, there's also a lower power that can be food, sex, gambling, money, you name it. And I have the ism and I know that. So for me, um, yeah, like I remember year 1 and 2 going to meetings left and right, like almost every day. And then almost be afraid. I remember talking to them like, I think I'm hiding out. I'm afraid to go and do things that I knew I wanted to do, but I was so afraid. And I remember just praying and just saying, God, like, grant me the serenity. And I was going obviously the remainder of the serenity part. And I was just really like, hey, I'm gonna have to do this. And I remember there's a guy who passed away, Bob Y, just a beautiful man. And he would tell me like faith isn't you have wings and you jump off the cliff. Faith is you jump off the cliff and you grow wings on the way down. And I know that's true because I ran into someone recently who was thinking about going back to school and they were so just crippled with anxiety. And I said, listen, the way I'm going to school now is not how I started my journey 4 years ago. It was 3 degrees ago, it was this. And I said, take a class, like dip your toe in the water.
Mhm.
you know, like don't have to go and do it all at once. And, I talk a lot about with one of my mentors about the TKO, the technical knockout, that so much of my gambling was predicated around being all or nothing. I want it now. The sky is either blue or it's falling down in a hailstorm of shit. Can I say shit
Mhm.
on this podcast?
You sure fucking can.
Great. So it's just raining, right?
Right.
And the ability to have, change my lexicon, if you will, my emotional vocabulary, to have this flexibility, because all I knew was either I'm feeling good, really good, or I'm feeling bad. In either way, I don't know what to do with it. If I'm feeling good, I go gamble. If I'm feeling bad.
Yep.
So to have this emotional dexterity, this flexibility to experience so many things. And I always tell people, like, I've experienced so many firsts in recovery, and that continues to happen. And that's kind of the beauty. Like, to be in recovery is to be in a state of constant growth. Like, the amount
Mhm.
of time it takes to have a healing is the amount of time it takes to have a revelation. So if I can have a new experience or an enlightenment every day, then I can continue to be growing. And I feel that if I stay stagnant, that I'm going backwards, right?
Right.
And I have to be willing to learn. And that's where, like, going to school has been so amazing, because not only am I learning, I'm doing the introspection and exploration on myself,
Right.
especially deeper on the graduate level when you get into,
Mm.
you know, uh, deeper stuff therapeutically and with clinical psychology. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Um, the steps of recovery and actually the working of the steps.
Mhm.
Did you go through that process, and at what point in time in recovery, if you did that take place, and what would you say your take is on the importance of the actual step work versus if you're going through the program and you're not venturing into that with a sponsor?
Right. So yeah, like recovery, like in my mind, can be very like emblematic of like swimming the English Channel. Like you get caught in these rip currents. Life is so overwhelming. I need a swim buddy. I need support. So I need a sponsor. And throughout different times in my life, I've had different sponsors. Some passed away, some it was a good fit at the time and then it wasn't, etc. But every time, and I look back on every sponsor, and I have love for all of them. I've learned something every time. And, I guess my question to anyone who's contemplating not doing step work, or whether they want to go a different route, and some people might feel comfortable doing without in a religious setting with a priest. Some people don't believe in that, and they maybe feel comfortable doing that work in a therapeutic setting in confidentiality with a clinician. I mean, there's a lot of ways. So, however one chooses to do that step work and take that risk to be vulnerable, I would just ask the question, how free do you want to be? And my answer is, I want to be fucking free. I want to
Yeah.
be exponentially free. And that's been a process, because I remember I was young, I was in and out of my gambling. I remember meeting with my sponsor at a time, this guy named Bob, and he'd be like, you're so out there, like you make coffee nervous. You're just out there. And he's like, there's only three things in life, and the stages in recovery are, it's growth, it's slide, and then it's pain. He goes, the difference between me and you is I've been doing this recovery for so long now, I don't have to deal with as much pain, because when I get pain, I look forward to that growth is on the other side. And pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I would always be aligned with a lot of suffering, because even though I didn't know it at that time, I just kept going out. So now when
Yeah.
something happens, like I have a family member, overdose, or I go through a very painful breakup or whatever, fill in the blank, I know that if I surrender to win and dig deep enough into the steps, into what I've learned in recovery, at this point in my life, it's not so much step work, it's a lifestyle. It's it's going to a meeting with someone new in recovery and spending time with them. It's making a phone call. It's going to a hot yoga class with one of my friends that yesterday, just to get some self-care. There's so many ways. So I think one of the turnoffs is when somebody's new or when somebody's struggling, sometimes it's easy to care about recovery so much because it's so passionate to anybody who it's changed their lives that it has the potential risk to be dogmatic. And that's when people, it's almost like blind faith. And that can be scary. And I always tell, especially the men and women that I've sponsored, like it took me 12 years to get a year. Like I earned my seat. So
Hmm.
I'm not going to judge somebody if they go out. In fact, I'm still sober here. Like they helped me. So I will always make time for other people. And I recognize that recovery isn't always linear. Um, Obviously, I'm going to school for, therapy. So I know a lot of work can be done in there. But at some point, I have to take my academic cap off and give credit to that. For me personally, recovery has and continues to take place within 12-step rooms. But ultimately, what happened for me is over time, like years ago, I was very fixed and I was very judgmental on how I viewed recovery. And I was just the steps this way and da 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 da. And then years went by and I softened and I softened and I explored more about myself. And I realized that anytime I'd see someone come into the room and I would get upset, it never was upset at me. Or excuse me, I was never upset at them. It was they were bringing something up that made me have to think about myself.
Right.
And when I realized that, my life and my recovery continued to change, you know, and it just got better and better and more. I tell you, like I think it's a line by Richard Dreyfuss in Mr. Holland's Opus. And he says, the music is in between the notes. So when I slow down and I don't look for the differences, but the similarities, I continue to be amazed. So when I truly surrender and keep an open mind and I truly surrender, I continue to be amazed. And I tell people, I don't have everything I want, but I have more than what I need. And that's a beautiful thing. And I always ask myself, because I told you I came in when I was like 19 and a half and
Right.
I ping ponged. I would ask myself, like, what are these motherfuckers, these old guys with gray hair? Why would they go to a meeting, Eric? They have all this time. They should be doing this. They should be doing that. And it wasn't until I started to make time that I realized not gambling is the tip of the iceberg. First of all, the first bet starts in the mind before it becomes
Right.
an allergic reaction in the body. It's
Right.
an
The
obsession.
relapse happens way
Yeah.
before the actual bet.
But
Yeah, that's right.
but second, there's that quote that's in the inside of the combo book, and it says, "I sought my soul but could not see. I sought my God, but he eluded me. I sought my brothers and sisters and found all three." That is so like full 360 of how inclusive our program is. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to be straight. You don't have to be gay. You don't have to be black. Fill in the blank. You can be whatever you want. All we say is stick with us and have your experience. And in GA, I found myself. I've found God and spirituality many times. And I like that song, What If God Was One of Us?
Hmm.
I see it in you. I see God in so many different people all the time. But I think the problem for many people that I've talked to is because everyone said, like, if you haven't gone to a meeting that you didn't like, or when you got upset, you haven't gone to enough meetings. And I smile when I say that because, recovery has pretty big social awareness. We have a lot of meetings, but we also have personalities, and that's emblematic of the real world.
That's right.
I have coworkers that I like, but it doesn't mean I'm going to go hang out with them after work and eat
Right.
donuts and coffee. Or I go to meetings. It doesn't mean I have to like everyone. And especially in a setting where I am going to be prone to be emotional and vulnerable,
For
it
sure.
just brings up resentments. And they always say, like, resentments are the number one offender. That's why I would, however someone chooses to do an inventory, usually resentments will be first because
Yep.
that's what takes people out. And for example, like hypothetically, like me having a resentment towards you, that's like me uh to die. Like it's so saying that, like, hey, I'm just letting you rent space in my head, right?
That's
And
right.
I feel, just as I've stuck around more, I am not fit to tell anybody exactly how to do something. All I can do is lovingly and with a lot of equality and grace and compassion, just make suggestions and say, hey, let me share with you my experience. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to share with you what worked for me. And if some of this sticks, great. And if some of it doesn't, that's okay. But I truly, and it's been a process over the years. I've gotten a lot better at it. It was something that in the beginning I was very rough around the edges and I was much more judgmental. And I think as I've gotten deeper into school too and worked with more people in these settings, but truly there was a line, and it was there was a rabbi and a Jesuit priest, and they did like a what was it? Some like thing for charity, but they were getting interviewed back and forth on this conversation. So the rabbi and the Jesuit priest, and the rabbi asked the Jesuit priest, like, hey, how do you really work on not judging? Like, how do you work on compassion? And this priest was like the founder of Homeboy Industries in LA. So this priest, like, not only founded Homeboy Industries, which is almost in every market, they own a cafe, a little restaurant now. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
works almost exclusively with convicts. And he says, and I'll never forget it, he goes, I don't judge people for the weights they carry. I have compassion for how they carry it. And the truth is, if you walk into a 12-step room, like a meeting, it's not a wellness community. It's not a health spa. We all are trying to get better, and some of us are sicker than others at different times in our lives.
Right.
Like, I can look back and tell you my first year and where I am now, and I was very different, and I was dealing with things differently. So I really try to empathize with that, and just really try to give everybody a fair shake is to the best of my ability. And I guess back to the step work, I guess the reason I kind of went and expounded on it is because I think for me personally, in the beginning, it was a real thing. Like year 1 and 2, I was like, oh, you got to do the steps. You got to do the steps. Ugh. But then I said, wait a minute. How long did it take me to want to do the
Mm-hmm.
steps?
Right.
And also, if someone doesn't feel comfortable, why don't they feel comfortable? And how can I try the best in a loving and supportive way to say, hey, I'm listening. I'm holding space for your experience. And maybe there's another way you can do it. Like, recovery isn't binary, you know, it's
Sure.
fluid, it's inclusive. And really the only requirement is a willingness to stop gambling, and further to, like, even go further. Out of all the 12 steps, the only thing I've done, if you want to look at it like binary, black or white, yes or no, the only thing I've done unequivocally right the last 7 years, 9 months, 1 week, 5 days, is not gamble, which is step one.
Step one. Yeah.
We admitted we were powerless over gambling in our lives. I have not gambled. All the other steps, I've lived in and out of them. And the
Ebbs and
truth is, like,
flows.
the
Yeah.
space, yeah, and the space between me and that spiritual solution is for the most part the same. I'm the one who's making the choice to come closer, connected to something that's greater than me,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a human condition, and it's like I get to live in the steps. So it's contingent upon my willingness to growth. And sometimes, like I was telling about what one of my mentors said, there is pain, but pain is the touchstone of spiritual growth.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I going to lean into the discomfort and pain and come out the other side, I'm going to grow? Or am I going to perpetuate it and turn into suffering, right? And sometimes that happens. I'm just grateful that I have been willing enough to not compound that into gambling, you know, and also be aware that, like, when I talk to people like you, I don't think it's a one size fits all answer. I don't think recovery is black or white. It's not linear. And the biggest, I think in the beginning it was a challenge, and now it's more of like a blessing to go back to school and say, hey, yes, I do have a huge orientation that's coincides with recovery. I also know about science and academics. And somewhere I asked to ask my higher power how I can mend all those gaps. So whoever I'm talking to, whether they're whatever orientation, whatever gender, whatever economic setting, whatever background, that I make them feel comfortable. Because I don't want anyone to have an experience for me, where like, oh, you know what? I ran into John, and let me tell you, Eric, I don't want to go back to a GA meeting. He didn't make me feel uncomfortable. Or you know what? you know, and that happens a lot in the rooms. It's just
Yeah.
we're humans, so
That's
we
right.
try our best. But as I've progressed, I really try to work on that. And I'm just grateful that we can talk about that, because yes, the steps are important, but I think it's like a hot topic. Like, a lot of people they sometimes, myself included early on, we have this expectation or this vision for how it should be done. And, it's this way or the highway. And that's not true.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and for me, I remember when I had, I don't know, it was probably 60 days and got a sponsor. One of the first things I heard was, I get, I can't guarantee you anything in this program, but I can guarantee you if you work the steps to the best of your ability, you're going to have a spiritual awakening. And of course, at the time, I didn't, I had no connection to spirituality. So
Yeah.
I didn't even really believe it or even understand what he was saying. But for some reason, I took it on blind faith that this person who had at the time probably 17 years or so, well, if he's saying it, I don't have any better answers. So let me
Well,
dive in and do it. And I think for me, what I learned through the steps was that's really how I became a better person. Like I heard
yeah.
this great quote of, if you want to feel better, go to meetings. And if you want to get better, work the steps. Right. And I think it's always a balance between those two things. But I wanted to get your take on the steps because I clearly you've had this massive evolution in your
Well,
years of recovery, right?
yeah. And it's not just like theoretical, like talking about the text of Gamblers Anonymous or any 12 steps and applications on a conversation. It's like, I've literally had times, like I remember in school once I transferred from one university to the next, and I felt just like this dark pit of doom. And I was driving down the freeway and I'm like, right there it happened. Like step three, like I was living in, I feel we live in the steps if we're fortunate enough to apply it.
Right.
And, step three, we made the decision to turn our will and our lives over to the cow, sorry.
Care of a power of our own
Yeah.
understands. Yeah.
Right. Well, the Latin root word of decision is scisere, incision, to cut. So a decision is to cut away. So many times I've had to ask myself, contrary action, am I willing to cut away from everything that my mind thinks in self and be willing to do something different? And I called somebody and they're like, where are you? And I'm like, I'm on campus, leaving on the freeway. Like, well, can you get to a meeting? I'm like, oh, you know what? Anaheim Self Help Center. I know where that is. I used to go here anyway. And then I
Mm-hmm.
started to go to that meeting for like that whole semester after class, and it really, really helped me. Or think about it like, here I am. I'd never been to your meeting. I don't necessarily like waking up on the weekends because I work late at night. And you even heard me at a meeting say, hey, I might not be the most respectful or
Right.
friendly secretary in the morning,
Yeah. Yeah.
And I share about that. But contrary action, I took that commitment. I fulfilled it to the best of my ability. And so many times, like, again, that the whole Caesare and the Latin root word, but thinking about it for me, to cut away, to make that decision, to cut away from everything I think I know and have an open mind that maybe somebody's had an experience and dealt with something in their life that I've dealt with, and they just might be able to share with me something that worked for them. If I'm open to accepting, that feedback, that support.
For sure. Well, this has been awesome, John. Thanks for taking all the time. So glad our paths crossed. And yeah, you're doing such great work in recovery, and what you articulated today for the audience. I think it's going to give a lot of people some really great perspectives and thoughts that maybe they haven't had before about their own journeys. And I would just ask one final question for the person out there who's on day one. The walls are caving in. They can't figure out, how do I stop gambling, and how do I try to make a real effort at taking control of my life and getting to a better place. And but I just don't know what to do. What's your advice for that person?
My advice would be one, like, thank you for sharing. I hear you. And then I would respond and say, you're not alone. Like, you don't have to do this alone, because I too had day one. And if I think about it and I really distill it, even right now, today, I have day one. Like, I cannot tell you with certainty that I am never going to gamble again. I can tell you that every day for the better part of 8 years, I've woken up and I've made that decision. Again, that decision to cut away from what I think I know and be open to a new experience. So I tell that person, listen, you're not alone. And would you call me later today to check in? You know, and if you feel comfortable, would you accept an invitation to a Zoom or an in-person meeting? You know, would you do that? Would you meet me halfway? Because I can't take the credit for school or work or anything. Like I did that with Eric, I did that with you, I did that with everyone else. Like it's this collective thing. Like I remember so many times struggling with the God word and saying, wow,
Hmm.
if I can just tap into that all these people, that this energy, this life force is greater than me, then I have so much recovery at my fingertips. And I didn't have to go through all this alone. I got to do it with all of you. And I just try to extend that love and support and grace to the newcomer and let them know that they're not alone.
Love it. All right. Well, that is a wrap on experience number 14 in the Gambling Recovery Lounge. Thanks so much again, John,
Cool.
for coming in. And glad to be back in the lounge in the new year of 2025. And we will have another episode coming up very soon. Thanks, everyone, for being with us in the Gambling Recovery Lounge.